Hey everyone, and welcome to Project Premium Harvest. My name is Matt. In today's video, we're going to be talking about if you make an investment into YMAG, would you be able to retire off of the distributions? And are you going to be able to keep your initial investment? Then we're going to look at two different timelines. We're going to look at the YMAG since inception, and we're also going to look at the prospectus change. I have been reading your guys' comments. You have been asking a lot about it, and I'm incorporating that data in this video. Right. Then we're going to discuss the yearly premiums. If you make a $1,000, $10,000, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000, and $1 million investment, we're going to see what the premiums look like for those kind of investments. And on top of that, we're going to look at tax considerations. Okay. And lastly, we're going to look at the a dividend calculator. So let's get started. All right, guys, just so that you know what I'm talking about, we are talking about YMAG, which is a YieldMax Magnificent 7 Fund of Option Income ETF, right? Currently, they have the distribution rate at 84.23%. When we look at my numbers, we're going to determine if that is accurate or inaccurate. So let's go to the spreadsheet. All right, guys, as you can see, I pulled all of the distributions starting from February 2024 up until January 2nd, 2025, right? So when this fund was initially incepted, it was a monthly payer, and it wasn't until September that it turned into a weekly payer. The way I calculated the numbers is I took every single distribution and added them up to get the total premium. And then since this fund has only been incepted for 11 months, I took that total premium and divided by 11. So the monthly yield off of YMAG since inception is about 64 cents per share a month, right? And if you look at that in a weekly scale, you break it down, it is 46 weeks, and the weekly payment is about 15.4 cents. If you look at the premium paid, I use $20.10 because that was the price of inception from Robinhood. So I used $20.10, and I took the total premium, divided it into $20.10, and then the distribution rate is about 35.26%, right? That's for, 11 months. So for a 12-month estimate, I added one more month to make it 12 months. And then the actual yield over a 12-month period with an estimate is 38.47%. That is since inception. We'll talk about the prospectus change numbers in a moment here. All right, let's jump over to Robinhood to look at the NAV erosion since inception. And then we're going to get some of the data for the prospectus change, the share price we're going to use, and determine the NAV erosion since then. So let's go over there real quick. Now that we're at the YMAG screen here, as you can see, we're using the inception price of $20.10, right? So I'm going to annotate that. You already saw it's already in the spreadsheet. But then for the prospectus change, I'm going to take all the numbers from October 1st moving forward, right? So that is a 14-week period. So starting October 1st, we're going to annotate that number. It's at $19.25, right? And then we're going to see, has it appreciated or depreciated in the last 14 weeks? So if we look right now, the YMAG is currently trading at $19.50. I looked at it about 45 minutes ago. It was at $19.58. So I'm going to use the number at $19.58. So theoretically, this fund has not NAV eroded, it actually NAV appreciated. So that is a really good thing since the prospectus changed, right? There was a downward trend in the market, and then it's gone up. So that's very good. We want to see that, right? Now let's go back to spreadsheet and then plug in those numbers. All right, I lied, one more number. As we're seeing right now, the NAV erosion for YMAG since inception is down 60 cents or 2.99%, right? When I looked at it earlier, the NAV erosion a little bit lower is about 52 cents. So I'm going to use that 52 cent number. I'm actually giving YieldMax a bonus here. So let's see if it pays off. Cool. Now let's go back to the spreadsheet. Okay, so this left-hand side is going to be the since inception side. So we annotated that, since inception in the last 11 months, YMAG has NAV eroded about 52 cents or about 60 cents, but I'm going to use 52 cents. And the way I calculate this is we're imagining that we're trying to live off this, we're retired, right? There's different mechanisms of trying to invest in a yield max. You can buy an ex-dividend, sell out, things like that. But the way I want to view this is, can you invest in this fund? Don't lose your initial investment, but then maintain a premium payment every single month. So the way I do it is I want to pull out the NAV erosion, out of the premium. I want to take that NAV erosion out of the premium. You can either reinvest it into the fund, or you basically keep it as cash so that you maintain the value of your account, right? It doesn't really matter how it's done, right? But you have to do something with the money so that you don't lose your account value. Ideally, I would like to reinvest it back in the fund so you get more shares, and over time, you're going to have a bigger distribution, right? But then, so we talked about the NAV erosion. That's awesome. And then, so the way taxes work, you have two different phrases, right? You have return of capital, which is the fund paying you back your own money. You do not pay taxes on them paying you back your own money. Then you have the net distribution outside of return of capital. You pay taxes on this at the ordinary income levels, right? So if you're a high income earner, then you're going to pay the high income percentage, right? If you're a low income earner, then you're going to pay a lower tax bracket level for those distributions, right? And I'm going to break that down once we get to the chart, right? See reference chart. But if you do the net total premium without taking into consideration taxes, we basically subtract that 52 cents a share from the premium. And if you look at that as a percentage, you're net 32.68%. If you look at that over the 11-month period, that averages about, per the 11-month, 59 cents a share per month. And then the net weekly, if you're doing a 46-week calculation, is at about 14.28 cents per share. So that's the since inception numbers. Now we're going to talk about the prospectus change numbers, which I'm going to be honest, they are pretty good, and was actually quite impressed that I threw in $20,000 because I sold out of ulty today, because that's an absolute trash investment. I did the video yesterday. It should went in there on dividend thinking it was going to go up, but then it just traded sideways. December was a little bit of a down month. I ended up taking about a $300 loss, but I'd rather take a $300 loss than take that dividend and then the potential for that fund to continue going down, right? So that's just my thought process on ulty. So let's talk about this prospectus change. So the way I calculated the prospectus change is since October 2nd here, I calculated all those premiums, right? Then I got $2.54 per share over a 14-week period. And then I basically divided this total premium by the 14 weeks. So the average weekly distribution is about 18.2 cents. And then if you look at that and multiply the 18.2 cents over a 52 weeks, I took that premium, that total premium, and then divided it into the share price we talked about from Robinhood, that 19.25, and that is a net distribution of 49.18%. That is really freaking good. I was surprised when I saw those numbers. Those 14 weeks is a very small data set. I'm not really a big fan of looking at small data sets of only 3 months, 3.5 months, but that is a significant improvement to what it was before, right? And then this is the number I was talking about. This is the total premium we came up with. And the NAV erosion over those 14-week period was actually no NAV erosion. It was NAV appreciation. The fund has actually been up 1.71% in the last 14 weeks. And that is a net share price appreciation of 33 cents a share, right? So then if you take this 33 cent appreciation and then you add that to the distribution, that's how we're going to come up with the actual distribution yield, just to kind of keep the number simple. And if you look at all of those numbers combined, that is 50.89%, which is even better, right? I'm loving to see these kind of numbers. This is exactly what I'm looking for as an investor for a high income ETF investor, right, guys? And if we break that number down even further with that NAV appreciation, it's about almost 19 cents a share per week. And over a 12-month period, or over a monthly period, that's about 81 cent distribution per share, which is pretty solid, right? So let's talk about how I figure out the taxes. This is the part that nobody really wants to talk about, but it's very important, especially if you're going to retire. You want to pay as little taxes as possible. You want to pay as little taxes as possible because you want to maintain your investment, right? So I'm going to talk about how I did that. So first, we got to go back to the YieldMax site and then look at the supplemental tax information. Right now that we're back at the YieldMax site, scroll down to the supplemental tax right here. And then we're going to be looking for the 19A TAC 1 form. YMAG. Right. As you guys can see on my screen, they have these forms starting from May 17th and go all the way up to October 25th. I actually emailed yieldmax to say, why are they lazy and then don't have all of the updated 19A1 forms so that we can figure out the return of capital and the distribution, right? But either way, I went through every single one of these forms and then pulled out the return of capital percentage and then the net distribution, which you're going to have to pay ordinary income on that distribution. So let's click on one as an example. Let me zoom in. Right. So the way this works is you have your estimated net investment and then your estimated return of capital. So the way this works is the part you don't pay taxes on is return of capital, right? So for this total distribution for May 17th, this was still a monthly payer at the time. The total distribution was 63 cents, right? And the return of capital was 37.34%. So you didn't have to pay taxes on 0.2378 of that distribution, but you do have to pay taxes on, 62.66%, which is 0.39 cents per share at your ordinary income tax bracket. I'll break it down more once we reference the chart, but just kind of wanted to talk through that a little bit right now. So let's go back to the spreadsheet. As I said, guys, I pulled out all those distributions, nice and neat, pulled out the different percentages, pulled out the net distribution that we have to pay taxes on. I'll put it this way. Because yieldmax didn't have a lot of data for some of the weeks and the months of these tax forms, what I did is I calculated these numbers and then whatever percentage this was, which is I just ran with that number, right? So the amount of tax exempt for this specific period, which they gave documentation for, was 1.773, and then what we have to pay taxes on at ordinary income levels is 1.89. So the way I calculated this is I added the tax exempt distribution and the pay taxes at ordinary income levels into one. It came up to a number, and then I basically took the pay taxes at ordinary income levels and divided it into the total number, and that's how we got the percentage. The amount of distribution you have to pay taxes on is 51.05%, but of this 51.05%, you pay at your income tax bracket. So now that we kind of started that conversation, let's go over to the spreadsheet, right? So I'm going to do a recap of the numbers at the top here. So this specific chart is going to be for the since inception, and then down here I have since the prospectus change. So we're going to compare both of these data points, right? Obviously, we've been talking about YMAG lately. The since inception price is about $20.10. The yield after all of NAV erosion considerations is 32.68%. The net dividend weekly average is 14 cents a share. The net dividend monthly average is about 59 cents a share. The total premium after all considerations are put into play, 6.57. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have to pay taxes on 51.05% of the distribution at ordinary income levels. So let's get started. So for a $1,000 investment into YMAG at $20.10 a share, you're going to own about 49.75 shares. For a $10,000 investment, it's going to be 497 shares. For a $25,000 investment, which is where I'm at, I put 20,000 in, is about 1,243 shares. $50,000 investment, 2,488. $100,000 investment, 4,975. And then for a $1 million investment, you're going to own 49,751 shares of this fund. So let's break down the numbers. For the $1,000 investment, you're going to get a weekly income of $7.10. The monthly income is going to be $29.71. And over a year period, you're going to make $326.82. Now let's talk about taxes, right? So since your yearly income falls between this $0 and $11,000 marker, you're going to have to pay taxes on 10%, right? But from this premium, how we talked about, you only have to pay taxes on 51.05% of the distribution. That number has been broken down here to near the tax rate. So of this $166.84 in distribution, you only have to pay $16.68 at a 10% tax rate. All right, so let's talk about the $10,000 investment. So for the $10,000 investment, we talked about the share count, but then the weekly premium is about $71.04 per week. The monthly income is $297.06. Over a year time frame, that $10,000 will net you $3,268.21. Of this $3,268, 51.05% is taxable. Because this $3,000 or this $1,668 falls in the $0 to $11,000 marker, we're only going to have to pay 10% taxes on this distribution, and 10% on 1,668 is $166.84. Looking at the $25,000 investment, the weekly income is going to be $177.61. The monthly income is going to be $742.66. The yearly income is $8,170.52. As we mentioned earlier, the amount of tax you have to pay on the distribution is 51.05% at ordinary income. 51% of $8,170 is $4,171.05. And because this, $4,171 falls in the $0 to $11,000 tax bracket, you only have to pay 10% taxes on this $4,000. All right, pretty simple, good enough, cool. So for that $50,000 investment, we have the weekly income is going to be $355. The monthly income is going to be $1,485. Over a year period, that's going to be $16,341 distributions, right? Then we take into account how much tax you're going to pay on the distribution. So 51.05% of $16,341 is $8,342. And because this $8,000 falls in the $0 to $11,000 bracket, you only have to pay 10% taxes on this. So that is $834.21. Cool. Now let's talk about the $100,000 investment. So for the $100,000 investment, the weekly income is going to be $710.45. The monthly income, $2,970. The yearly income is going to be $32,682.09. Taking into consideration the tax distribution at ordinary incomes, 51.05% of $32,682 is $16,684. So now this tax kind of gets a little complicated because now we're going to encroach into two separate brackets, right? $16,684 is more than that $11,000 mark. So from $0 to $11,000 is going to get taxed at 10%. So that's why I have these first tax at 10%. So that's $1,100. And then anything above that $11,000 up until $16,684.21, that's going to get taxed at a 12% rate. And so the taxes on that, $5,684.21 is $568.42. All right, lastly, the most interesting part, we have the $1 million investment, right? So the weekly income on a $1 million investment is going to be $7,104.48. The monthly income is going to be $29,706.47. The yearly income, $326,820.90. Once we take into consideration a 51.05%, $166,842.07. And because this is going to encroach on multiple tax brackets, we're going to break it down. So the first, $0 to $11,000 is taxed at, 10%. So that's where that $1,100 come from. The next $33,725 is going to be taxed at that 12% tax bracket, right? Because it's 11,000 of 44,725. And then anything from that third tax bracket from 44,726 to 95,375, that's about $50,000, that's going to be taxed at 22%. And then the $71,000 is going to be taxed at 24%. Here are the numbers all added up. And then as you can see, here's the distribution that you have to pay taxes on. It lines up. So these numbers look right. So then I'm not going to go into each individual one, but once you subtract, this $33,442.09 of taxes, your net since inception of owning YMAG, if you invested $1 million, is $293,378.81. So it's a pretty good investment. All right, guys, now let's talk about the prospectus change. So for this part, I'm only going to talk about the $1,000 investment, $50,000 investment, and then $1 million investment. We kind of get the idea here. The same rules apply here. We're still investing YMAG. We talked about the prospectus change starting around October 1st. Well, it's definitely September, but we're just going to start taking the data from October to keep it nice and clean. So that share price at that October timeframe was $19.25. This premium yield is at 50.89%. The net weekly dividend is 18 cents, almost 19 cents. The net monthly average is 81.65 cents. Dividend monthly average is about 81 cents a share. And then the yearly total premium is $9.80. And the tax distribution at ordinary income is still 51.05%. That has not changed. Let's dive into numbers, right? So for that $1,000 investment with that new prospectus change, your weekly income is $9.79, monthly income $42.42, yearly $508.99, 51.05% of 508 is $259, and a 10% tax rate of 259 is $25.98. Pretty self-explanatory. So that $50,000 investment, is going to net you $489.35 weekly. In a monthly time span, that's going to net you $2,120.78. And over a year period, that investment is going to net you $25,449.35, right? So of this $25,449, 51.05% is the amount of distributions that we have to pay taxes on at ordinary income. So let's break it down. So 51.05% is $12,991.89. This $12,000 is going to hit two separate tax brackets. So that first tax bracket, you're going to max it out. You're going to have to pay 10% on it. So that's $1,100. And that 12% is anything residual. So you're going to have to pay $239.02 for a total of $1,339.02 in taxes. And then once you look at the net, that's $24,110.33 that goes into your pocket. All right, now talking about the $1 million investment, the weekly income is $9,787. Man, that sounds freaking amazing. I need to get to $1 million stat, right? And the monthly income is about $42,415.58. The yearly income is $508,987.01. If you do 51.05% of that distribution, we have to pay the ordinary income tax on this amount. So it's going to hit multiple tax brackets. We're going to max out pretty much 4 tax brackets, and then so we pretty much max out 5 tax brackets, and then whatever is residual for the last one at 35%, we just calculate whatever's left over, and that's still going to be at 35%. So if you make $1 million for $1 million investment, you're going to have to pay $62,837.75 in taxes. Once you subtract the taxes from the yearly income, that is a net of $446,149.26. Pretty wild, guys. That is a lot of freaking money. All right, I'm going to run over to a dividend calculator. We're going to calculate 2 different ones. I'm going to do the $20,000 investment, which is kind of what I believe most people have in this fund. They have about 1,000 shares, so about $20,000. And for fun's sake, we're going to do the $1 million investment. And also, we'll just use the new prospectus change numbers, because those seem pretty cool. Let's get into it. All right, actually, we're going to do $25,000 for the first example. So we're doing YMAG as the individual ETF. They are a weekly pair. We're going to drip it, yes, for a $25,000 investment of YMAG at $19.25 a share. You're going to own 1,298 shares. We're going to do $0 annual contribution. The dividend tax rate is basically that amount we paid. So it was like $649 off that $25,000. We divided that into the total distribution. That's the tax rate, 5.1%. So that's what we're going to go with. Tax exempt dividend income allowed. We're just going to do $0. We just kind of incorporate it into the tax rate. The initial annual dividend yield is about 49.18%. I'm pulling out the NAV appreciation part because I am able to calculate that in this section here with the expected annual share price appreciation, right? So let's invest it for 20 years, calculate it. So if you invest like this for the next 20 years, you're going to have $96 million in your account. That's if all market conditions stay exactly the same. I don't think that's going to happen. However, this is a very nice look, but let's break it down. Right? See how accurate this is. Right? So it's pretty much looks to be correct, you know. You initially started off with, 1,298 shares. Your annual dividend is about $12,000, like almost 49%. After the drip value is 39,000. The shares you own, and then the new balance. And then when would it be a good time to retire? 200,000, 400, 600, million. So let's crunch the numbers real quick for $1 million investment. Everything pretty much stays the same except the share price is going to go to 49,751. Not share price. I keep saying share price. I meant the number of shares, or some would say chairs. All right, let's calculate that dividend. So if you somehow have $1 million and want to invest in the YMAG, after 20 years, you're going to have $3.6 billion. How realistic is that? Probably unrealistic, but I think it's always fun to look at these dividend calculators. But yeah, guys, that pretty much wraps up the video. Hopefully this brought more insight into the prospectus change and then the fund since inception. From what we have noted for the prospectus change, it has significantly improved the performance of YMAG. I'm actually going to create a video. I don't know what the timeline would be, but I'm going to compare YMAG, YMAX, and ulty since the prospectus change, and it has been improvement. For YMAG, it is definitely a 100% yes. It has approved. We talked about the different metrics. It's almost like 18% difference since inception versus since October and the prospectus change. So yeah, yieldmax has definitely got good credit there, at least from me. And yeah, guys, that wraps up the video. Enjoy your journey out there. Have fun. Hope to see you again. Also want to do a quick shout out to Oracle. He shouted me out in one of his videos. I'm going to give him a shout out back. So if you're not familiar with the channel, I'll link it in the description. That's it, guys.